Hello everyone, my name is Matej and I'm happy to be director of Alebo Institute. We are independent policy and security defense think tank from Slovakia. Today I have here two tremendous speakers with whom I will discuss issue of non-nuclear strategic deterrence and preemptive approaches to strategy. Our guest speaker is Dr. Tomasz Smura from Poland. He is a member of board and director of research office at Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Tomasz, welcome. And our lead speaker is Matej Rafael Riško, who is our research fellow at Alebo Institute. We will start with a brief presentation from Matej's side, and then we'll move to a commented reaction from Tomasz. And the last part of discussion, we will have open discussion about the topic of the day. Matej, please, floor is yours.
Yeah, Matej, thank you for having me and for your nice words. So I will share my presentation, which I prepared for this event. So please give me a second. I will try to do it. So is it possible to view it, or is it clear? Everything is working perfect. So I would like to start. My research topic is non-nuclear strategic deterrence and preemptive approach strategy. And the question behind it, is this a new anti-access area denial approach? In Poland, we can observe it now in the moment. So I will focus to, let's say, 2 or 3 strategic arguments to the core in the using of concept of area denial and using some preemptive tactics, especially I would like to point on especially against classical targets without any significant movements, which is quite important. I mean, let's say some kind of history of that approach in the work of John Mearheimer, called the PGMs and conventional deterrence from 1993. And after several research fellows and analysts from RAND institutes were developing this sort of theory. So at the end, we can see that this kind of strategy were developed to some sort of anti-access area denial concept using PGM missiles, using some special ammunition, and at the end of the day, using some multiple rocket launcher, which is basically a type of precision guided munition. So, the introduction, Poland wants to buy rocket artillery from the Lockheed and from the Korean, South Korean company Hanwha, which would create a special model or special form and concept in the Polish armed forces called Division Module Ognowy, which basically means in English it's an organizational structure of 2 batteries, basically, of launchers. So my question, or something what I would like to know, and I try to answer on it, is how this influence the strategic logic of let's say the new approach against Russian war planning, and how this will influence the stability in the region, especially in the eastern flank of the NATO and the problem of the Suwalki Gap and Baltic states. So we can move. And now you can see something like a restricted operation zone of the set of exercises called OSEN 2009, which is basic, or it means in Russian autumn. I hope I pronounce it correctly, because I don't speak Russian, but I mean it's awesome. And this is something which is temporarily discussed in Western literature, because it is something like so-called the most dangerous place in the world, or something, which is, I would like to say, quite overrated. However, it has some, let's say, fait accompli potential, which means that Russia, under certain circumstances, can deny the Baltics from the sufficient help of NATO states. But what are the preconditions? The question are, what are the preconditions? The first one is the landlocked position of Belarus, and especially the Grodno, with the regional operational direction situated in Grodno. I mean, in the 46 situation direction, operation direction, but doesn't really matter. Now the Russian army is under process of change because of the, let's say, NATO expansion of Sweden and Finland. So it will be probably changed somehow. But the Grodno is a key point for Russian logistics operations and for developing some offensive. So now I will show you the picture I did, but well, please forgive my very bad IT skills, but okay. However, this is something which is we can observe the certain plans from the OSN 2009, which include this area. And why it is important, the most of the discussion is focusing mainly on Suwalki Gap and E67 road, which is not the core of the problem, because if you want to do some fait accompli operation from the point of view of operational planning, I'm not speaking about strategic planning, of course, because that's the another one level. You have to consider basically this area from Białystok to Augustów, and Mariupol is a key point in Lithuania because of the river Neman. So that's the very short introduction to the problematics, and now we can see these circles which became very famous in some like NATO circles. I know it sounds quite funny. This show us the position of, or suspected position of Russian SAM systems, especially S-300 and S-400, and on the coast there are battalion systems of S-8. Give me a second. Bastion system, of course, but this is not very applicable. We are talking about S-400 the mostly, and S-300 anti-aircraft systems. Russia basically believes that this war concept, creating from one of the best SAM system in the world, can prevent and the NATO and the enemy forces, from their point of view, from entering the area at some level. And my question, or my argument is that the capabilities of long fire and precision fire could basically broke this war concept to some extent, and but it's based on preemption theory. You have to be prepared to attack first, then your opponent is able to cover his own assets and deploy them, and basically disperse them to the terrain, which could be potentially dangerous for you, because it may help to cover it and to sustain something like a relative survivability of it. So that's why few people I was in a contact claim that it's working. That's true, but there is one, let's say, problem, and there's something like a contra argument of it, that we now, after all of these problems, we can have something like a real problem with first strike stability. So that's the counter argument. But my answer on it is, that's about the artillery fire. My answer on it is that the potential impact of the deployment of multiple rocket launchers could prevent them also in a quantity, because it's about a combination, as we know from the theory, especially from the veto theory. There is nothing like a real precise fire which can prevent an excess if there is not sufficient amount of it. So yeah, and Poland, it seems at least, reflects it, and we are speaking about, I have these numbers here, of 288 missile vehicles, or basically launchers, which can fire a sufficient amount of missile. If we can compare it with Ukraine case, especially in this Kherson offensive, we can observe the using of MRL. There was, 14 launchers, which basically means 120 missiles and GMLRs per day. If all launchers launch all missiles per day. So it's also based on some, let's say, massive, but really massive fire capability, and it's a combination of overwhelming and really precision targeting. The theory, especially Karen Horte, is saying that this conventional deterrence is based on the possibility to precisely place your weapon. In this case, it's a missile, but it could be precision, any other precision guided mission, from the mortars one to the artillery shells, etc., to place where you want to distract the critical point of enemy logistics, command and control centers, etc. So, and this is important because it's basically impossible, or well, it's not completely impossible, but it's really hard to target the some moving object. For example, Russia has a SRBMs and their supply vehicles, which can be deployed to the terrain quite effectively. In theory, to observe this exercises of strategic forces is quite, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's harder than normal military exercises. Yeah. And the impact of potential non-nuclear strategic weapons may be tactical, but also operational, and also strategic in nature. And why I'm speaking about the strategic impact, because it will influence the whole area from the Baltic states to Belarus, because Belarus would become, under certain circumstances, of course, something like a deep zone or zone of defense in depth eastward to Poland. It's about a possibility basically to push the enemy A2AD bubble eastward, and also to the western side, because of this problem with Kaliningrad. And yeah, we are talking about 28 rocket divisions, as I already mentioned, which includes 3 artillery batteries and consists of 6 launchers, command battery, a logistic company, and command. It's probably a command company, but I'm not sure about. And it would be based on 3 pillars, according to Marciniak, some Polish officer. Launcher models of HIMARS on domestic truck Yelts, integrated with this Polish domestic management system, combat management systems. It's quite similar, like this US one, integrated command and control system. I am suspicious that it's based on the US one, but we are not here to discuss or we can, of course, but I would rather discuss the strategic and operational impacts rather than these concrete one things. And yeah, of course, it consists from some other domestic supplements, which is also very important because it's about the possibility to gain some, let's say, independency, so-called independence in these things. Yeah, this is the organizational structure of this rocket division model of Nové, and it applies for I think Hunmo rocket division. It's not completely the same like in HIMARS case, but doesn't really matter. It's similar. So about some real deployment. It will consist from 3 main levels. Basically, it reflects a traditional military strategy and military thinking from tactical to strategical level, or rather from strategic to tactical one. And it would be based on some classical artillery or shells artillery from 300 to 40 kilometers range. The crab systems or K-29, I mean the Korean ones. But which is more interesting and which is the core of my study is the operational strategic level, and it's based on these multiple rocket launcher systems with the strategic range of 300 to 500 kilometers. Basically, it's about the ATACMS and the South Korean KTSSM to missile and operational level. Basically, it's about GMLRS and some other Kunmo or these Korean missiles with a very similar range. Well, as I said, it's about ability to suppress and destroy the command and control centers, which is also the most one of the most important thing. The ability to suppress ground-based air defense systems and ground-based air defense system capabilities, not just these launchers of 40A and 6 missiles of S-400 systems or S-300 systems, but also about the possibility to hit the radar stations, control vehicles, etc. And it's about the possibility to hit the high value targets and basically to do some but really relatively basic but suppression of air defense and destruction of air defense. And it's about the overwhelming an enemy. Some sufficient amount of the missiles would be fired, and not so precisely, or let's say it's precise because the circular improbable errors of these missiles are about 5 meters, which basically means that at least 50% of fired missiles would hit the place with a relative accuracy of 5 meters. But basically the idea behind it is some relatively sufficient part of these missiles would be distracted by AD systems, but the saturation of AD would be so high that it would be impossible to react properly for an enemy, and it could basically allow to Poland or also the Estonia, which I didn't mention because it's not so related topic, but Estonia is purchasing the same category of HIMARS system, but it's mainly about Poland. Is the most important player in the theater, but to hit these high value targets by overwhelming and saturation of the AD in the area of responsibility, of course, in the war theater of war. And I'm talking mostly about this northern theater because there are another one, basically Russian intentional possibility to develop some offensive to Warsaw with a fait accompli potential, but this area or this theater is mostly based on some high mobility forces rather than this preemption and quite static approach to strategy because of the character of the terrain, etc. But yeah, it could be used in the same way, but this is mostly about quite like conventional approach to deterrence rather than this like very mobile scenario. But very short to counterforce possibility, because as we know from some relevant sources, Russia is intending its own strategy towards these Baltic countries, also with the nuclear level. We can doubt it somehow, because some sources are claiming that it's only about a few articles. The basically main one is in the Polish magazine Prost, but some NATO operational planners are thinking quite seriously, and we basically couldn't avoid this problematic because the Kaliningrad is a place where Russia is storing its own nuclear weapons. Well, Kolikovo is basically mostly for the Navy, but we don't have some real information about, especially because of the fact that the Russian airport of its strategic forces hosting some MiG-31 like nowadays or currently, which could carry some like double W's capable missiles, especially Kinjal, is there. And this is, the literature is usually saying that, give me a second. The literature is saying that the core of the problematic of it is based on the speed of the reaction, or how fast is your reaction, and it is also about possibility to hit the most of the delivery platforms as soon as possible. So we can say, or to assume that these multiple rocket launchers would be or could be used also as a counterforce possibility, but not to hit the storage, which is quite resistant against such an attack, but against these delivery platforms. And it's not only about these MiG-31s, but it's also about the truck vehicles which can transport the nuclear weapons to the planes or to the submarines, etc. And this could be possible, but also depends on weather conditions and some other things. But I'm mentioning it because we simply couldn't avoid this problematic. To summary, the mobility of the system is important, but AD coverage must not be neglected. And for the bubble, I mean this bubble of multiple rocket launcher systems, which should create this AD anti-access area denial capabilities. The area of penetration must basically contain all of these aspects, and the penetration area must be focused on the area of deployment too. And the bubble will have two primary objectives: to overwhelming and precise but massive firepower, as I already mentioned, and to some recommendation for making it operational. The most important thing is reconnaissance. So ISAR. And now I will end my presentation. Thank you for following it.
Thank you, Matej, for your in-depth presentation. And now I would like to ask you, Matej, Tomasz, sorry for your reactions, comments, and feedback.
Sure. Thank you very much, Matej, and thanks to the ADAPT Institute for inviting me to this interesting project. It's always nice to hear that somebody is interested in Poland, in our military development programs. So it's important. So I'm really happy to hear also your opinions and yours, the recommendation vis-a-vis our armed forces modernization process. So I think that Matej presentation was quite comprehensive and rich, so I don't know if I have like many things to add. So maybe just let me to give you some like more broader perspective to it, and some additional issues which are worth to emphasize in this context. So of course, when it comes to the building this the system, let's say anti-access area denial capabilities in Poland, it's not completely new the project. So you guys know that for many the Western European countries, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine of February 22, it was kind of wake-up call. But it's not the case when it comes to Poland or other countries of let's say the Bucharest 9 or the Central Eastern Europe region. So from the Polish point of view, the Russian invasion was like logic continuation of such actions like the invasion of Georgia, 2028, and the illegal annexation of Crimea and first operation in Donbass, and also huge Russian armed forces modernization programs, GPW 2020 worth of $600 billion, so huge modernizations effort. So in this context, Poland also, like many years before, at the beginning of 2010, introduced the so-called Komorowski doctrine, based on it's from the surname of our president at that time, and which was mainly about kind of reverse from the adapted after the Poland accession to NATO, the focus on the, let's say, out of area missions capabilities, like the long range transport, wheeled infantry fighting vehicles, which were quite useful in operations like Iraq and Afghanistan, but not so much when it comes to territorial defense of Poland. So, based on that, our armed forces were were expected to be more focused on the territorial defense. And the following that concept, as a follow of this concept, the two important programs that were implemented: the technical modernizations program and the priority goals of technical modernization. And these the two documents first time the concept of long range strike capabilities appeared. So actually, one of the 14 priority goals was exactly the MLRS multi-launcher rocket systems, long range, but also some capabilities when it comes to our air forces, and also like new generation submarines. There was also discussion if our new submarines shouldn't be, shouldn't have also cruise missiles. Also long-range strike capabilities, on its board, let's say. So in 2016, after the Russian, the first Russian invasion of Ukraine and illegal annexation of Crimea, we had strategic review, and the result of that was presented in the concept. I don't remember exactly the name, but there was a defense concept of Republic of Poland, something like that. It was the strategic documents based on this strategic review, and one of the conclusions of its strategy, of this strategic review, it was first of all the further increase of defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by, I believe, 2026, if I'm not wrong. and exactly building our own anti-access area denial capabilities. So based on these documents and the previous modernizations plan, we implemented these important programs like MLRS, the huge one. It was basically, you know, at the beginning, not so big as it is right now, but it existed. And also we decided to procure JASM. It's very advanced standoff missiles for our F-16, both in classic version, let's say, and extended range, which is able to strike the targets on the distance of 900 kilometers, so quite long. So after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 22, our modernizations programs, we first of all, based on our new Homeland Defense Act from the March 2022, we decided to increase significantly the defense spending. So right now, for this year, we are expect to spend 3% of GDP for the defense, but our government thinks even about like 4% of the GDP, which will be probably the highest defense spending, at least in Europe, European parts of NATO, maybe even in the NATO as a whole, and it definitely allowed us to accelerate implementation of some modernizations process. So as you know, as Matej also mentioned, that before the Russian invasions, we procured only one, let's say, battalion, of HIMARS system. It's basically 18 launchers, but the plans were bigger, of course. But due to the lack of monies in our defense budget, we decided to split these projects into more phases. So as a part of the first phases, we decided to buy only like 18 launchers. But after the Russian invasions, our MOD, based on the new Homeland Defense Act, we received like more money for defense significantly. We extended this project, and as Matej mentioned, right now our plans are like 18th, let's say, battalions of MLRS, which is more or less somewhere between 600, 700 launcher, which is a really significant number. So probably it's even more launchers than U.S. Army has right now. It's stock. So it's really significant number. But as I mentioned, it's only like part of the wider concept of building our own A2AD, in which also like new long-range strike capabilities for F-16s are included. And also, please remember that Poland decided even before the Russian invasion, to procure the F-35 for our air forces, which are expected to replace our obsolete MiG-29 Su-22, which, as you know, thanks to their stealth capabilities, are able to reach targets deeply behind enemy lines. So I believe that we also will procure for F-35 some standoff weapon, which also allow to reach the targets, on the enemy ground. So this program, it's part of the wider concept of building of deterrence system, the system in Poland. But of course, it's not only about procurement of additional equipment. We also need to do some homework when it comes to intellectual thinking, over these programs, let's say. So definitely you're right, Matej, in your presentations that the first thing is that we need to consider for what is the purpose of this system. Yes, so actually, as one senior level general told me, that if you procure like system which is able to reach targets like with the range of 300 kilometers, or like when it comes to just air 900 kilometers, it's not like striking the targets from Łódź to Sielce, it's small town close to the border, but these kind of capabilities are created to reach targets deeply behind enemy lines. So you need to being like military officer, you need to prepare your decision makers, you need to prepare politicians that we are buying, we are procuring capabilities which are aimed definitely not for partly for the defense purposes, but these are clearly offensive capabilities which are created to strike targets literally in Russia in this geopolitical situation. So it also demands from politicians, decision makers, some discussion. How should decision-making process looks in this situation? How we should make this decision in consultations with our NATO allies, with our partners. It's also about building the whole environment. It's not like only that you just can buy some missiles, and they are working. You need to build the targeting systems. You have to have the ISR, all the capabilities like satellitary reconnaissance and things like that. So it's whole environment you need to build to make sure that these capabilities will be used properly. And there are also like bigger challenges. Matej mentioned that these systems are mainly also created to give you some advantage when it comes to first strike capabilities. Sometimes when you have information from your intelligence that the enemy strike is imminent and is real, sometimes being like decision maker, you need to make a very difficult decision if you if you are ready and able to strike the targets even before the strike against your territory. So you mentioned like that these capabilities can be used to eliminate enemy SRBMs, the other air forces capabilities, but it's very difficult political decision because if you were not attacked first, you can undermine consensus within the NATO, because it's not like situation of Article 5, because there was not like territory on your the territory before, and you decided to use the armed forces. So it makes a lot of the important and challenging questions you need to process implementing such kind of capabilities. So I hope that my decision makers, politicians in Poland also are doing right now, together with procuring these advanced systems. They are working to create the whole environment when it comes to both technical issues, like I mentioned, ASR and other things, but also decision making process, how to use and when use the capabilities like that. Okay, it's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomasz. It was really comprehensive, and I'm very glad that you bring into the attention the complexity of the whole thing and how it needs to be integrated with political decision making and other necessary steps to bring the whole idea fully operational. Now, I would like to ask both of you, observing the tragic and still ongoing war in Ukraine, we saw that artillery and especially rocket artillery is playing important part in the conflict. Observing the lessons learned, or to draw some lessons learned from the conflict, would you say, are there any things that would mean substantial changes for the concept of strategic deterrence by non-nuclear weapons, as Matej just described it in your presentation? And we discuss, are there any changes, or is it actually what we are observing supporting the idea and making it even more relevant than before?
Well, if I may, from my perspective, my point of view, the lessons from Ukraine for deterrence is not that much important. The funny thing of it, or let's say funny thing, is that deterrence is working if it's credible and if you have this capability. And Ukrainians basically do not have any one of it, or there wasn't some such substantial and credible, let's say, trying to deter Russia before an invasion. Ukrainians weren't able to deter Russia and didn't have these capabilities. And in ongoing war, you can use these long fires for special purposes, and these deep interdictions are like very sufficient. But it has to be noted that it depends on the character of the terrain and depends on the theater. For example, during the Kherson, it was extremely important because basically the Ukrainians were able to push Russia back to the sea from the distance of from 60 to 80 kilometers, which is an active range of GM LRS, and it basically were able to prevent Russia from supplying one single axis or one single line of advance, and it was based on the systematic activity for 4 months to make some real reasonable military result. So yeah, it's working, but this completely another operational concept. You are in a total war. You are in a defense. Let's say defense in depth, but and especially maybe the most important one thing, Ukrainians still have only 18 launchers. This is something completely different from what Poland is intention to do, or what Poland basically would like to do. So I mean, there are another very interesting thing on the Ukraine war, and this non-strategic weapons, and it's an effect to strategic nuclear deterrence. Russia is very everywhere from such kind of using dual capable system in a way which could provoke some reaction, and this applies also from this non-nuclear strategic weapon systems. And for example, you can see how Russia is using Iskander missiles against Ukraine. There are targets of strategic nature, but Russia is not doing it. But it's also because Ukraine has such a capability to do some like really like sufficient attacks into Russian depth. But it's about the strategy of escalation, de-escalation, to make some escalation domains. Russia doesn't have something like that in the moment. Maybe Russia was the closest to something like that in the very first of day of March, but or in, let's say, first 2 weeks of the war, but definitely not now. And I mean, there aren't real parallels between, or some real minor, because the deterrence is based on the concept of credibility. As Thomas perfectly said, it's about decision-making process, and it's a pure offensive capability in a sense. you have to take some real decision to use it on a preemptive way, which is basically important because it is the operational level of the army. Ukrainians didn't do something like that, and they also didn't have any capabilities for doing it. Maybe this is the most important thing of my work or my study from my point of view, because this really has a some potential to radically change the posture of the alliance, because the some country, I'm not speaking it's bad. I like this strategy, right? But some country is in a position which basically allows them to use power against any other country without consultation, or maybe it could be a consultation with NATO or with EU on the strategic level, but it's based on the capability to do this. And maybe from the point of view of strategic deterrence and Ukraine parallels, SRBMs and ISAR finding position of flying missiles and artillery rockets is something which should be followed quite very carefully, because but this is the tactical level, how to accommodate strategy to use. And maybe at the end of my speech, my contribution, one of the most important things which Tomasz also mentioned was about the space or the room of maneuvers into a decision-making process from the highest strategic level to the tactical one or operational one, because this is working, but it has to be credible, and for being it credible, you have to have a capability to find your targets and do it. But if your enemy is observing that you are in the preparation for attack, basically the enemy could easily or quite easily to cover and hide its own capabilities, to disperse them to the terrain, to cover with the camouflage skills, etc. And credibility of your deterrence is being down but rapidly. So and this is why I'm thinking that there are no real parallels, or just a minor one, with the Ukraine war and this case. So that's all for me.
So the most important lesson I learned when it comes to deterrence, from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and where being a result of that, is that first of all we estimated that the Russians' military capabilities. It's clear, but also Russians' determination. So I remember that before the invasion of February 2022, we also, as a Pulaski Foundation, we conducted some war games, decision-making games, also which were concentrated also on some kind of contingency on the eastern flanks. Some people, like former decision makers or former military officers, we involved in this exercise. Were really careful, and they really sometimes they were even afraid really about escalation when it comes to Russia. Yes, so we during the discussions or conducting any kind of exercise like that, we had real stormy discussions if we should strike any target in Russia, what will be the result if you use conventional capabilities to strike, I don't know, any target in Kaliningrad, also if Russia wouldn't use nuclear weapons in the result. But I think that the war in Ukraine really challenge this hypothesis and approach. Actually, we saw that Ukrainians many times used their offensive and strike capabilities against really important targets in Russia, like Kerch Bridge, to Crimea. Also, you remember, guys, that Ukrainians probably, thanks to their special forces, prepared operation against long range, nuclear aviation base angles. When Russians nuclear bombers were struck. And actually, Russia didn't, decided to escalate somehow their military actions against Ukraine. So actually, we see that the Ukrainians somehow deconstruct the whole narration of Russian Federation that all the strike against Crimea, the Russian territory, will meet with the doomsday consequences, maybe with the using nuclear weapon. So actually, I think that when it comes to deterrence before the nuclear threshold, there is a quite wide space. It actually the building conventional deterrence strategy. It's good idea based on the results we see from the aggression of Ukraine. And actually we don't have to really be afraid of all Russia reactions, because we see that lot of it's purely narrations, not supported by real actions. Thanks for me.
If I may briefly comment it.
Sure, please.
Because nuclear weapons is something I discuss very often. It's part of my work. I definitely agree with the most of your arguments. Maybe a small note: there is a difference between the thresholds against these air capabilities, air nuclear capabilities, and real navy and naval and ground capabilities. Because Russia is realizing that basically air capabilities are most vulnerable. And by the way, Russia has a real problem with covering the nuclear facilities with air defense systems, because Russia has a really great air defense systems, but they're not in a sufficient amount. But this is something which Russia is constantly realizing. But I mean, it's not completely applies in the case of Kaliningrad, because it's a naval base and something like let's say gate to the ocean and to the sphere of influence in the Baltic Ocean and foremost. So I agree with you that thresholds is pretty high, and there are many of space between some sort of action and nuclear employment. However, it's about how Russia is intentionally want to employ nuclear weapons. We consider some exercises like Ladorga or West 2009 or maybe West 2013. Russia is probably considering some nuclear strikes against the capital as a result of some sort of escalation, but in certain cases. So, but this is mostly about a tactical level, which is about the strategic level, to bring some strategic effect from it, and which is important in this case, and also for Poland, for Russia, not only for Russia. The strategic effect is maybe important, but it's impossible to win the war with strategic effect like that. You have to have some real control of area, which is based on ground forces. And if it's impossible to do it, it's not a really good idea to strike and nuke someone, because there could be a real response, and without any significant military effect. Yeah. By the way, nuclear weapon is extremely ineffective kind of weapon from the military point of view. You have to employ at least 10 relatively small nuclear weapons into the battlefield for gaining some real effect. So Russia is basically considered or realize, or let's say, that nuclear threatening is not so it's not working, especially in Ukraine. But under certain circumstances, there could be a nuclear response, especially if Poland threaten nuclear facilities for naval. So, and now we have some, after all of that, we have something like a paradox of stability and instability, and it's about real consideration, maneuvers in the decision-making process, to take a look into how Russia will react in certain cases, because this basically told us that there is something like the fear from escalation, but also a willing to escalate on a conventional way because the nuclear threshold is so high. And there is a possibility, and it's also part of my project, to use a non-nuclear conventional deterrence for offensive purposes, basically for prevention such an attack or nuclear strike. Because if there will be a real possibility to win the war quite quickly, it will be an offensive war. I'm creating a scenario now, but for example, targeting the Kaliningrad, there is possibility to use this stability and instability products for provoking war. But it could also have some real problems if there will be something like unwilling to use or late use of the offensive capability. Russia could resort to nuclear weapon as a tool for de-escalation of the situation in some way. So that's why I'm talking about the whole concept of strategy of employment or deployment of the forces, employment of it, etc., etc. So it's not that easy. Yeah, I agree that this Ukrainian war basically broke some narratives, but it's not that easy. And yeah, for example, SLBM and ICBM capabilities of the West are much higher than Russians, right? So Russia are still in a position of warring of such a conventional attack as well. Yeah, it's based mostly about the US capabilities of real deep strikes, but we shouldn't forget it. So that's from me.
Okay, and I would conclude with one final question. When do you believe is it possible for Poland to have the capabilities we are discussing really on the ground and operational? Because right now we witness a lot of delays on delivery of armed procurement as everybody is on a shopping spree. Defense industry is openly speaking about need to expand the production lines and need to open more new factories. So my question for all of you is, when do you expect to have this concept on the paper materialized in reality?
So if you allow me to start, so actually, the official, like timelines, probably as soon as possible. So we expect to have like majority of the programs we are implementing right now concluded in next, like 3-4 years. So it also concerns like F-35, the new mine battle tanks for the Polish army, because the capabilities we discussed here, it's only like part of the wider Polish modernization of the process. So that we decided to procure also like additional Howitzer which are also quite important when it comes to deterrence. They are not able to reach targets maybe at such distance like HIMARS, but also it's like 50-60 kilometers, so they are quite important in this context, and they are quite high numbers. So that Poland decided to buy more than 300 Abrams, both new one and more, and like used U.S. Marine Corps, some mine battle tanks from Korea, Hot Wizards. So actually there are like many things in the pipeline right now, and the biggest question is about the budget. Yes, so actually Poland decided to increase the defense spending to, as I mentioned, 3% of the GDP, even more, in the years to come. But still, that there is a challenge if there will be, for this, it's after if we successfully delivered all these plans we have, probably Poland will have like more mine battle tanks than France, UK, and Germany. So Polish economy, it's doing quite well, but it's big questions, if we will be able to buy all this stuff we wanted to have. And you are military experts, so that the procurement is one thing, but the most difficult is maintenance, service, training. So procuring stuff is only like 30% that of the total life cost of the military system. So to have all these capabilities in line, effective, and able to be used in any contingency, we need to train and prepare many military professionals to operate these systems, and be able to pay for the service, for the maintenance, for infrastructure, because such capabilities like F-35, for example, very state of the art systems need to very advanced infrastructure in many areas, which also demand you to spend a lot of money to prepare it. So actually, this is a huge challenge, I believe. Probably we in the years to come, especially if there will be some economic slowdown, and if the geopolitical situation change, there can be some tendencies to take a look at our defense spending, maybe to prioritize some programs. So probably, I don't know, it's my personal assessment, but probably it will be really difficult to deliver all the programs in size we planned at this stage. And secondly, the huge issue, it's manpower in Poland. Actually, to prepare the specialists to operate all these 1,000 mine battle tanks, 600 Hot Wizards, 600 MLRS systems, launchers, and things like that. It demands you to prepare like a lot of, and also recruit like a huge the amount of the people ready to serve for the army. And that still in Poland military service is voluntary one. So actually we don't have compulsory the military service. And our right now our goals is it's even like 300,000 a big army when it comes to manpower, which is quite difficult because as I mentioned, our economy is doing pretty well, so it's huge market demand for the right now for the people. So I know that to recruit so many people ready to serve in armed forces, it will be like real challenge from the demographic point of view, let's say.
Yeah, thanks for the vote. Yeah, I'm not able to say the correct year, of course, but there is a real horizon of 2030. basically it would depend on many factors, not only the economic one, but maybe about the international situation, the increasing of growing of China, like the changing the nature of international systems as we have already know it. But I mean, which is maybe the most important thing in this hypothetical discussion is the company from which, if we are talking about just only about the procurement, because I totally agree with Thomas, it's just 40% of it. But if we are speaking about this problematic, I would say maybe the most important thing is that Poland has decided to buy not only from Lockheed but also from South Korea, from Hanwha. And South Korea is a country which disposes with real production capabilities, basically just because of the feeling, and it's not only the feeling, but relative threatening or relative threat of the country. And South Korea is probably able to supply Poland quite fast. Let's say in a horizon of 6 or 7 years, but it wouldn't be only about the supplies with these, well, let's say launcher vehicles, etc., but also about creating command centers, and all this stuff Thomas already mentioned. I believe that the real horizon is based on 10 years, and maybe one important thing, the government. Maybe the next government would decide to cut the program in a certain way or something, which is something I basically cannot predict. Yeah, but maybe, and it's only my estimation, the program is numerically overrated in a sense for these purposes. If the government would decide to cut, there is still let's say something like a real power which could be used for these purposes. It's not ideal case, but yeah, it could be fine. So briefly, like this.
Thank you very much, you both. We are right now out of time for our discussion, which I believe was very rich in detail and truly comprehensive. Gentlemen, thank you one more time for your time and for your insights into this very interesting topic.
Thank you, Matej.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to have you. And now I would like to thank also our viewers. Please leave us with a comment. And of course, find Matej's final paper on our website. We will upload it with this video in the comment section. Thank you for being here with us today.